Welcome to episode 2 of Wicked Weapons. Today we'll be talking about pepperbox guns. My name is Jared and I'm a nerd that likes guns. I'm joined by Matt and Josiah. Josiah, would you like to introduce yourself?
I guess I'm the special guest on this episode. Jared's brother-in-law. I have no knowledge of weapons really outside of just pop culture. I got a social science degree and I teach high school, so I'm always ready to learn something new. And I'm also a huge nerd, so I guess a big qualification for this podcast.
My name's Matt. I am Jared's stepdad. I have been started out just hobbyist gunsmith, but moved to professionally 15-ish years ago. But have been pretty much working on guns since birth with my dad. So that's all we ever knew was building our own, working on our own, fixing our own, and learning from some other guy or some old timers over the years. So that's my experience in this, or my expertise that I'll try to be.
So yeah, you're
definitely not an expert. I'm not a historian.
Yeah, you're definitely going to come in handy on this episode, though.
Yeah, you're more of an expert than me or Jared, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's been gunsmithing as long as I've known him. All right, so pepperbox guns. I'll take this introduction. For those that don't know, early firearms had to be reloaded after every shot fired. Obviously, I'm talking about muzzle loaders, flintlock rifles and stuff that they had around the Revolutionary War time period. But this process was not the modern reload of slapping a new magazine full of rounds in and racking one into the chamber. No, a round lead ball had to be manually loaded in from the business end of the barrel with a portion of gunpowder for every shot. This led to relatively slow firing times, so this begs the question: if you were a gun designer in the early years of firearm history, how would you work around the fire rate limitations of early single-barrel muzzle-loaded flintlocks? While we don't have time to break down the nitty-gritty of the full evolution of firearm mechanics, it's needless to say that early on, the amount of time it took to send more rounds downrange at your enemies was a big factor in warfare. One way that was found to speed things up was to start introducing more barrels. Pepperbox guns were a perfect example of this.
And
and that's it.
That's it.
That's the whole doc. We're done now. I mean, that's it.
We're done. All right, time to go. Well, you're right on the idea of in the concept. I would think, like I said earlier, I'm not a historian, but I know on some of the original pepperbox guns. One, you got to figure too, and like I said, not getting in the nitty gritty, but like this is early black powder, so it's not very efficient, and obviously moisture kills on black powder. Well, any powder, but a lot of the original ones, from what I remember, and we may get into this later, but they fired every barrel same time, boom, and
yeah. We will kind of get into that a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at these things. Look at the initial picture, and like I don't really see any mechanism that would like round these out. Yeah, exactly. So it looks like you're just almost firing like a shotgun.
Well, and something really crazy about these that I was reading, normally like on a revolver, there's a cylinder that holds generally 6 rounds. And as you're pulling the trigger, or in a single action, you're cocking the hammer back, and that'll rotate the cylinder to where the next round is in line with the barrel. On a lot of these pepperbox guns, there was nothing like that. Like you would just hand turn a lot of them to line up.
It looked like a miniature Gatling gun for the ones that don't, you got 6, 5, 4, however many barrels wrapped around. But yeah, like on that picture, and like I said, I've only handled a handful, but that top left one, if I'm not mistaken, that one does rotate. I think the two beside it, but I think Jared mentioned it, you hand rotate. But like the bottom, that little 4-barrel one that you can see the 4.
Yeah, that's a little like Derringer, right?
Derringer, right. And those, at some point in time, they made a switch, but that was just for the up and down barrels, because they could actually switch on the hammer as to you shoot the top barrel, then depending on the manufacturer. But I think Derringers were all. I don't see a lot of them come through, but you shoot the bottom barrel, then you shoot the top barrel or whatever. And because they're muzzle loader, they don't have an individual primer system without having to prime the back of it and rotate it like some of the
Yeah.
or, original Colts
that
are
little Derringer
the next-
in that picture there looks like it's actually a breech loader.
It does, and that's why I'm saying that's kind of looks like the earlier Derringer. I mean, zoomed in, I can definitely. I'm assuming that's a pivot pin on the very front end of it, but it's a very tiny pivot pin. If I remember, there was one of them that it didn't hinge. I mean, it hinged, but it hinged just a little bit, and then you just pulled the whole barrel off, the whole set.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah,
because that
Now,
does
on
look
that
like
one,
an older one.
mhm.
Well, when I look at these things, I just think like steampunk. Like that's what I get,
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
I could see a bunch of dudes with top hats and monocles running around with these things.
We will kind of get into like the years that these were prevalent, and it is kind of right around that time period that some of the steampunk atmosphere is based off of. So you're kind of right on the money.
Well,
Yeah.
honestly, I can't imagine shooting this thing and then immediately taking my hand and touching the barrel and twisting it around. I mean, would it not be like hot? Like, would you
Yeah.
not burn your
Eh,
hand?
Well,
not right away.
Okay.
And by the time you reloaded it, it's going to cool down. And your modern barrel. I mean, I can hold on to a bare barrel and shoot a couple times, before it's too hot to touch. Depending on the thickness of the barrel, of course. And yeah, those are definitely very thin, but they had to have such a low charge in them. That was some of the issues I know that I had read about, because especially the ones that fired all of them off, it was like a wrist breaker.
yeah.
You got just a true hand cannon going off.
Yeah.
And so they downcharged them. They made a lot of your smaller calibers. A lot of these were meant to shoot across the poker table.
Yeah.
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 Or
You definitely don't get the vibe of distance with these things.
no,
Like-
no, not
Yeah.
at all.
We
Not at all. They're belly guns, pretty much.
Man, y'all just
yeah.
like recited everything I had wrote down in the document. So there's
Oh,
there's
no,
no
did I
point in
really?
us being here. I'm kidding.
No.
But yeah, we'll get into that in a little more detail here in a little bit.
I get carried away, jumping ahead of my brain.
No, it's all
Won't
good,
stop.
man. It's all good. If I need to, I'll just move some of that towards the end when we're covering those topics or something.
Yeah.
Use your editing magic for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Does anybody want to take, I guess, just page 2?
Yeah, I got it. I'll do it.
All right.
All right, this is development. All right, so the early predecessors to the pepper box guns were the two-barrel turnover pistols. These pistols, while still made on old flintlock systems, somewhat solved the fire rate issue by allowing the user to have two barrels loaded and 2 rounds ready to fire at the same time. After 1 round was fired, the user would quite literally turn over the barrels, so the second barrel was now in the firing position, and now the unloaded barrel was underneath. Due to the success of these flintlock pistols, the next logical step would be to add more barrels, right? Well, purportedly around 1790, Nock, a gunsmith in England, and Segalis, a gunsmith in Belgium, started making the first pepper box guns, named for a similar appearance to the household pepper shakers. These guns were fitted with anywhere from 3 to 7 barrels. These early pepper box guns were still built on the flintlock system, and the barrels had to be rotated by hand. It wasn't until the 1800s that after the Industrial Revolution mass production became possible and the first cartridge ammunition was made the most commonly known pepper box guns that were designed. Before this point, each firearm was unique, handmade by gunsmiths for their customers. Every pepper box before this point was different from the others in some way, and they were usually owned by the wealthy.
Yeah, so a lot of what I was reading when I was researching this was like, so you can kind of see in these pictures I have here of the 2-barrel turnover pistols. Those are obviously still built on the flintlock system. And Matt, I'll ask you here in a second to kind of explain the flintlock system.
Yeah, I'm gonna need it.
So, but yeah, basically back around the Revolutionary War time period, 1770 to like 1800, there really weren't a lot of, lower class people that had firearms. They might have had like a musket or something, but
Right.
they didn't have, a pistol that had multiple barrels, and could fire 2 shots. Because Matt, I don't know if you want to just like throw a ballpark estimate out there how long it would actually take to reload a flintlock pistol that was just a 1-barrel.
Depends on how good you are. I mean, they used to say the Civil War guys, the good ones, could reload a full rifle 3 times a minute and fire accurately.
Yeah. But
I could never get close to that with one. I mean, and the main muzzleloader I ever shoot is an old Kentucky long rifle Hawkins that my dad built, and I've got here. It's cap and it's cap and ball. It's not flintlock.
yeah,
So when you say a flintlock system, like I'm imagining like
mhm.
you pour
No,
the
if you actually look at that picture of that pistol there on the left, you can see, the hammer. So that hammer, if you see, it's kind of got a clamp on the top of it, and that's a piece of flint that it's holding. And then the part that's sticking up vertical, that's
yeah,
sitting there
right
to
in
protect
front of the flint. You can kind
right in
of
front of the
see
hammer
like the black scrapes on it where it
where it hits.
strikes.
When it's closed, so one's going to come in contact. But when the hammer falls underneath that, the striker is a very small pan that holds black powder, and you've got a flash hole from there that goes into the barrel. And usually, you had to do. We always had to on ours. You used a different grain of powder, black powder in that flash pan because that hole is tiny, because you just want a small flash to set off your actual charge. So you had to use a smaller powder. But when you pull the trigger, that hammer going forward and it's holding on to a little piece of flint, and it scrapes down that. And on the front of that striker is a hinge. So when that hits it, it pops up, throws a load of sparks right down in that little flash pan, and then your spark shoots into your barrel and takes off.
So they didn't use any kind of like oil or fat or anything for this. It was just
No.
all like dry powder.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The only time they ever did anything like that was on the ball to
Oh,
patch and ball, what they called it, and they would, before they came out with mini balls. I can talk about those if need to, but they would take we use it's called pillow ticking. Is your old, I don't know if you've ever seen the old pillows that's like white and blue striped, and it's like laying on sandpaper. But it's old, like my parents' age. And anyways, they would strip that up. That was just kind of the old cloth. It was really tough, but they would either cover it, put it some sort of either beeswax, but a lot of times there was, fat that had been rendered down, just to kind of an extra seal with that cloth, because that's what's sealing, especially in these, because these don't even have a rifling in them. It's just
Yeah,
smooth bore.
it's
wow.
smooth bore, so it's
Yeah,
it's
your
literally a
accuracy is
round.
just zilch.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we'll
it's
get
just a
into
round
it
ball.
later, but a lot of the early pepper boxes were also smooth bore.
They weren't doing rifling yet.
So they weren't lubing up the ball before they put it in there, make it fire out faster or anything.
No,
No.
that was a combination of just kind of helping keep the barrel clean as well,
Okay.
because black powder is very corrosive and nasty and gets funky, dirty really quick, especially the old stuff. But yeah, and so it was kind of a multi-purpose deal by putting some sort of either oil or grease or fat on that pillow ticking or patching that wrapped around the ball.
Well, these things are pretty ornate. I mean, you can definitely tell this
Oh
is
yeah,
like a rich man's gun. The
yeah.
first ones are like, they kind of look kind of gritty, but of course, yeah, I think even that much metal wouldn't be just some average dude carrying around. Probably like a
No, upper
mercenary
statesman.
or yeah, right. This is the arms they were talking about in the Constitution, maybe.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. A lot of these that you were just mentioning, almost all of your gunsmiths came from being watchmakers first. And so much of that's just in smaller form, but you've got this lever to move this, which pushes this, drops the sear off, bang, you've got your explosion. So they would use a lot of that geometry and working in very small. If you can put a old pocket watch together, you can do this stuff blindfolded. But yeah, but a lot of those, I mean, you could see the detail work in the metal because they had already been carving on watches and doing ornate stuff. So it all just kind of flowed into that time period of everybody's carrying a gun now, Wild West. So
Yeah.
they kind of moved over to building or working on guns.
One thing I wanted to add in here is actually that before the cartridge ammunition became a thing, because that's kind of what we have now of like your 9mm 45 caliber, like that's all cartridge ammunition where the powder charge is contained within a brass cartridge that also has the bullet pressed in with it and has a primer at the back of it that serves as the ignition source. But before the cartridge ammunition was actually percussion caps.
That was the transition from flintlock. to
cartridge.
to your percussion cap, which is they just got rid of the flint.
Yeah.
Basically, almost could use the same deal, but just changed out or machined in to then have a nipple on the outside that you put, because they were not your primers like you think of today. They're just a little copper cap or that you just slide on, and it had the, I can't remember what they used for the internal percussion part.
Yeah. So if
that became much more reliable.
Yeah.
Ignition.
So if you look at the first initial picture I have up on page 1,
mm-hmm.
So the one on the left that you were initially talking about, the biggest one, the one
mm-hmm.
directly beside it, and then the one all the way in the bottom right, all three of those, y'all see that?
The hump on top of it?
Yeah, that hump on top of it is basically
where the primer was, the hammer for the primer.
Yeah, so all three of those are actually percussion cap pepper boxes.
I didn't notice that on the bottom one. I see the hammer now. I didn't notice that on the bottom one.
Yeah, so I actually, I have to get this in the podcast that I stated this incorrectly, that most of the pepper boxes were actually percussion cap and not really cartridge ammunition. So that was a mistake on my part.
Yeah, I mean, they were all muzzle loaders. I don't remember them except for maybe that Derringer one in the middle.
Matt, do you want to take everything on page 3 up until effectiveness and usage?
Sure. With the development of cartridge ammunition, pepper box guns, and really all guns for that matter, were no longer muzzle loaders, meaning a bullet no longer had to be manually loaded in front or in from the business end of the firearm. So the next logical step was to eliminate the need to manually rotate the barrel as well.
So
a few pepper box. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're good. No.
Obviously, with my statement that I just made and you talking about how a lot of them were still muzzle loaders, that little paragraph is kind of incorrect. But yeah, so my bad. Anybody listening, but like we already stated, we're not pros at this. So, yeah, anyways, continue.
Well, and I mean, one of the next logical steps was, the early Colt revolvers, they were still muzzleloader. You just loaded the cylinder. They still had a cap on the back, but it was now a rotating cylinder using the same barrel.
Yeah.
Those seem to it would take forever to load one of those in a hurry. I mean, especially being shot at or on a horse. I'm like, there'd be a lot of them be loaded without powder. A few pepper boxes in the mid to late 1800s still had barrels that had to be manually rotated, but most had an internal rotating mechanism, much like modern double action revolvers. Some pepper box guns even fire the bottommost barrel rather than the top. English gunsmith Joseph Manton in the 1830s produced pepper boxes with retractable knife blades. Oh yeah, and a pistol with a whopping 18 barrels.
Okay.
It kind of feels like a measuring contest of whose gun has the most barrels on it.
You're really overcompensating for something.
And there was even one of them that was a ring. I don't know if you'd ever seen, but it was tiny, and it was one of those. I think it fired the little rimfire ones, and literally, I mean, might scare somebody, but with a pop. But it probably wasn't even as loud as the old cap guns when you're a kid.
I guess if it's a ring, if you're like punching somebody with it, maybe it would break the skin then, since it's so close.
I'd never even fired one of those. I've seen, those were museum bullets for me. I've never even got to fire some of those. But where were I? From 1851 to 1854. Robbins and Lawrence made pepper boxes with rifle barrels and a break-action breech loading system. Many pepper boxes prior to this had to be partially disassembled to be loaded.
Yeah, so I think whenever they did actually start to transition, and again, this is just my piecing together, my inference here. Whenever they did actually start to transition from muzzle loading, a lot of the pepper boxes, you had to unscrew the barrels off of the gun, put the cartridge or the I assume it would be a cartridge type round at this point. You would have to unscrew the barrels, put all the cartridges in, and then put the barrels back on. So it's like you're literally taking half the gun off to load it and then putting it back on. And do you want to explain for the audience, and I guess Josiah in this case as well, the breech loading?
Yeah, the breech loading. I mean, it's your breech is back where your bullet action. That's the breech portion, muzzle, obviously the other end. But the early ones then were kind of like a break action, like you see the old double barrel shotguns. Everybody's seen those where you pop it open, you unload your shells, throw 2 more in. That's your breech loaders, and that's what they're talking about here is the break action, where it's just breaking open. You're looking at the back of the chamber, drop your cartridges in, close it, go to shooting, and they're super strong, super effective. Just like my over and unders that I shoot all the time. Is a break action breech loading type or the.
I did want to say, like, it is interesting to kind of see kind of like how the problem solving in this and kind of like the evolution of like these guns over time. And I know we're headed towards like getting to like that classic like revolver kind of thing, but it's like it's so funny because they never really do anything that's like, hey, we're going to solve all these issues all at once. It's like, hey, we have to load it in a very slow way. And then it's like, okay, now let's add more barrels. It's like, all right, well, now let's fix the powder thing. And, I mean, gosh, how many, from 1790 to like 1850, and I don't know, just you kind of wonder like how many of these guns were being used at the same time. I'm sure like, some guy's grandpa probably had an old, what do you call it, black powder, and then his grandson gets the cap. But anyways, right now, as far as I can tell, if you want to kill somebody, it has to be really premeditated.
Yeah,
like everything is like, if you're gonna kill somebody or like you're preparing to go into war, I mean, you got to take a good couple hours to make sure all your munitions is set up and your guns are like ready to go.
Yeah, and like I said, I think a lot of these were, more your poker guys and your your elites, and just kind of a statement on some of them, just to have it. This may be a one-off or only 10 made or whatever the case may be.
Well,
they could charge you on the nice, the nice engraved and fancy, like you were showing at the top of the other ones, and the early rotating type, like we mentioned earlier.
And I think later on in the document, I think y'all will be actually really shocked at how far in history these actually went.
Okay.
Because, obviously, to some extent, they're still around. We got pictures of them. Probably a lot of these have been restored to some capacity.
Well, I'm sure some dudes are still trying to hunt with these, during primitive hunting season. I don't know if you can kill a deer with one.
No. I don't think you stand a chance on that one.
Matt, I could be wrong about this, but aren't like the Revolutionary War era, like muskets, aren't those basically equivalent to a 50 cal? Like I guess the bullet size.
Yeah, they had that, and they had some on like 60. There was like 60 something. I know there's 68s now. Can't remember what they were back then. We don't. Again, I don't see many of even like that type of era ones come through. People bring me a lot of antique ones that's been sitting around or so and so, and I'd love to get my hands on even ones close to those, just to look at them and look at the craftsmanship differences.
Yeah,
from then to today's stuff. But yeah, and it and the smooth, but like I was talking about earlier, that was another transition in between. Everything was a smooth bore, but before they did that, they started going to your rifled muzzleloaders, and then to make that even more effective, they did. I mentioned earlier was the Powerball, which was basically like a pointed bullet, but it had a cone in the back of it, so like it could be a little bit smaller, just a tiny bit smaller than the rifling, so you could shove it down the barrel really easy.
Oh wow!
And then whenever you shot, the pressure would pop that cone open, straighten your seal, and then fire your projectile. And of course, now it's spinning and it's pointed, and you've got more velocity, you've got better powder. But yeah, that's all one little steps that were in between all of those advancements, even before you started going to the revolver of today.
Yeah, I wonder what the last military or the last usage of pepper boxes was. Like, who was still running around with these?
I really think y'all are going to be surprised at the end of this document.
Well, I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if y'all are ready, I'll keep moving.
It,
So effectiveness and usage. Just think about this. So metal is heavy. So take multiple metal pipes, slap them to a wooden handle, and try to hold them up just by that handle. You probably can't hold it very stable. So indeed, one of the biggest flaws with pepperbox guns was the weight distribution. The more barrels or the longer the barrels, the harder it became to aim accurately. Moreover, many pepperboxes had their hammer directly in the line of sight. You know, most modern weapons, they have sights at the top. They have a rear sight and a front sight.
Yeah, none of these have that. I noticed that at the beginning. Like, none of them have any kind of bead or anything to like line it up.
So some of them did actually have a front bead sight sometimes, but that was only a few of them. So most of them really did just have the hammer right in the line of sight, which obviously would make it difficult to aim at anything that was further than, you know, right up near you. Some actually had their hammers made with slots that the user was supposed to aim through. Many of them also had smoothbore barrels, which we've kind of touched on that. Despite rifling being commonly used by the time that a lot of them were made, but honestly, kind of like you were talking about, Josiah, I kind of think that that was probably more just, you know, somebody's grandpa bought this smoothbore pepperbox gun and has passed it down, you know, so it's like by the time rifling is around, they're just like, I don't need to buy a new gun. I've got a gun.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know,
Yeah.
mentality.
So luckily, the primary market for them was for civilian self-defense, meaning they would most often be used, like Matt was saying, you know, like guys playing poker, dude cheats at the poker game, and
Yeah, these things are going to kill you no matter what. Like, they're still lethal, you know.
Yeah.
So
you got to think. You go ahead. Sorry.
Well, he's got gold prospectors in here, and that's like the perfect image, right?
Yeah,
You know, he's like come off the mountain. He's got his gold dust. You know, he buys a few prostitutes, a few drinks, and all of a sudden he's getting angry, pulls out his pepper box, starts blowing people away.
Yeah. So gold prospectors in 1849, you know, obviously the California gold rush, they favored large pepper boxes. There were actually some pepper box like rifles made, so pretty good size. They probably, I would assume, were using the pistol type pepper boxes because the rifle ones weren't very common from what I can tell. But they used them for defense against robbers and Native Americans, and also they would use them, this was stated but I didn't include it in here, they would also use them against other gold prospectors. You know, the guy would claim. Yeah. So the early percussion box or percussion cap pepper boxes were considered dangerous because, and Matt, you talked about this, because igniting one powder charge for one barrel could sometimes carry over to the others, essentially firing from all barrels at once. This was...
She's blowing a hole in this guy. Hopefully there's not more than one.
Yeah, I mean, think about that pistol that, what was his name? Joseph Manton. Think about that pistol he made with 18 barrels. I mean, you're...
Yeah.
It really was like a shotgun.
Yeah.
Guys, I feel like, you know, we probably don't have enough data on like the survival rate of like getting hit with a pepper box, but you know, you just go admire modern weapons for being so clean when they like, you know, hit somebody. Like, man, can you imagine digging out at like even 4 of these like little barrel sized like, oh gosh, like iron things, like lead balls. Yeah, lead poisoning now too. I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah, then you get gangrene because there's no.
Oh man.
Hoping the doctor washed his hands.
So.
Oh gosh, I know. Oh my goodness.
If
you think about even modern day, I think that the average self-defense pistol is 3 to 5 yards. I think it's in that sort of 5 to 7 or something like that is your average self-defense pistol usage. So I mean, that's kind of these. There wasn't really a point, like why they call them belly guns too. It's you're not really aiming. You're just dude's right here. It's in your pocket. You may even not even pull it out. Just shoot it out of your pocket. You
Yeah.
know, just whatever
No.
you need to hope you
Me
don't
and-
catch your pocket on fire. But
Me and are thinking about buying like another, self-defense weapon. What we have right now is like this old, like snub-nosed 38. That's all we got. And like, I feel like that's a pretty good equivalent to this. Cause like you really have to be like right up next to somebody. Like if someone ever broke into our house, like I don't even know if I could hit him from across the room.
Yeah,
I had to be
because
like right next to him.
snub-nosed barrel is like, what is that, Matt? Like a inch and a
2
quarter,
inches.
inch and a
Dude,
half?
It's
it is
very inch and a half, 2 inches. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not overcompensating for anything with this gun, like for sure. Like when I pull it out, it is really tiny.
Yeah, if anything, it's the other way around. You're
That's right. I'm
undercompensating.
very confident.
Yeah, they are. Those are fun. I mean, they're kind of your little loud hand cannons. I mean, they can work great, and sometimes they're better than your automatics. If you ask a lot of the old timers, because if one round doesn't go off, and you just pull the trigger again, and it's automatically there. You're not tapping or racking.
Yeah, you don't have jams and stuff like you have with the semi-automatics.
And the other thing with those, I know we're totally jumping off. You can edit this out, whatever. But like you look at your guides up in Alaska, they're carrying the giant revolvers, Smith 500s and 460s, stop a grizzly or whatever. But I had been told this, and maybe you can fact check, but I think I've been told numerous times the reason they do that, because if you take an automatic pistol, say a bear got on them and they pulled their gun and they're chest to chest with the body of a bear and their pistol, an automatic's not going to fire. If you push the slide back just a little bit, you've got it out of battery. Where a revolver doesn't need that. Point the barrel and just start squeezing until he quits.
Well, what's funny about this particular gun that I have too? I'm sorry, not gun. This 38 that I have.
I'm gonna have to bleep you out with the air horn.
Bleep me out. Sorry.
Yeah.
But you have to unscrew some kind of pin to load it. Like it's very much like the pepper box. Like it's loaded right now because like there's no way I'd be able to unscrew it and then put in the ammunition and then screw it back. Like it's like ready to go. So
it doesn't have a door on the side of it to open, and
yeah, a lot of revolvers now have that release on the side of it.
It's called a loading gate, or the whole cylinder just pops out when you push the button.
Yeah,
on the left side.
I mean, this was given to me by my grandfather, so we're kind of like circling back here. Like this is just an old gun. I know it probably needs service.
Si's sitting here with a freaking pepper box.
Yeah, he's got a pepper box in his closet.
It's like don't break into my house because I'm going to hit you with 5 bullets all at once. It's going to ignite, burn my house down. Oh gosh.
So that problem with the percussion cap pepper boxes was rectified, obviously, with advancements in ammunition technology. And a lot of them had the safety features on the guns themselves. So they would have like a little catch right by the nipple. Obviously you're carrying around 18 barrels in your pocket. You don't want to accidentally fire all of them and blow your leg off. So they implemented some safety features on some of the later ones.
Yeah, they weren't really concerned about safety when they were making these.
Si, do you want to take this next portion here?
Yeah, sure. All right, so where'd they go? Pepper box guns gradually started disappearing from around the 1850s with the production of true revolvers, made by names you probably know, like Colt, Smith & Wesson, etc. They did have a brief resurgence in the late 1800s as they became more compact, easily concealable. Pocket-sized self-defense pistols around this time, a 5-barrel pepper box gun called the Zener, I don't know, probably butchered that. Pistol was almost accepted as the officer's sidearm for the Swedish Army. Another variant known as the Apache revolver, which was allegedly popular among Paris street gangs, featured a folding blade and brass knuckles. Looking at your picture here, is a hodgepodge of everything.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The late pepper box guns were a transition into Derringers. Derringer pistols are still popular today and are small guns that can easily fit into a pocket and are typically multi-barreled and typically fire a small caliber of ammunition.
Yeah, so Matt was he pointed out that Derringer in that first picture. But Matt, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but Derringers, you don't rotate the barrel. So kind of like Matt was talking about, it'll fire. So on this one up at the top that I've got this picture of, it's 4 barrels and it'll fire the top 2 at the same time, and then the bottom two on the next trigger pull. And Matt, you probably know better than me what calibers Derringers are normally in nowadays.
Oh, nowadays, anything you want, anywhere from 22 caliber up to 45-70.
Whoa. Okay. That'd break your hand.
There's only like an inch or so of rifling. They do make a little bit longer one, but yeah, they're hand cannons. Derringers are weird because, and I didn't say right earlier actually, but the hinging on a Derringer, it's kind of backwards. The hinge is on the top, so the barrel rotates back towards you when you open it. You know, if you were holding it out in front of you straight away, they hinge up, so they're kind of weird. But it's over and under, and yeah, there's no rotation. You just have a little switch as to which barrel you're shooting, or I don't remember if they did one that where it was always going to be the bottom barrel first and the top barrel, or somebody else can if any of the listeners end up knowing that one.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I can't remember.
I'm sure if we get any traction, this episode will probably have tons of people like correcting us in the comments.
Oh, hey, that's all for. Like I said,
well, we warned them.
I work on the ones I do, but I'm not a historian, so yeah.
I wanted to talk about this Apache revolver. I'm looking at this thing. You can tell they definitely like. Well, and it's like you can tell they learned. Like, oh gosh, my shot might not work, so I better add a knife, and I better add some brass knuckles. Just in case.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm looking at gosh, where would you? I don't even know how many gun laws are being broken with this thing right now.
Oh, man. They didn't exist back then. But,
no.
Matt, I think this is basically the 1800s equivalent of the double barrel magazine extended clip.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and the crazy thing on these, you look, like there's no trigger guard on it, which you're never gonna shoot one of those two. I've obviously never seen one of these in person. I can't. It almost looks like it wrote. I can't see if there's a hammer on it. I don't know if that one was a single or double action.
Yeah, I don't know.
On Apache, but yeah, all those full exposed triggers like that. They fold forward, but it still is like, no trigger guard.
Yeah,
and you're throwing this around your pocket, and it's gonna go off. But yeah, those I've seen those in pictures. The few the gun museums I've been to, I'd never seen one of those, but I've seen pictures of them or some of the gun shows, just doing this old gun or these old, just stories about them.
Yeah,
and I've seen those come across.
Well, these are popular among like gang members in France. So they're like starting revolutions. I don't know if they're worried about blowing their pant leg off.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, that's like that Swiss. It's like their Swiss Army knife. It's got a little bit of everything on it. So.
Yeah, I guess it's just the utility of it. I do want to add, I wish I would have put the picture in here, but there was an older pepper box that had a bayonet, but it wasn't like your traditional like knife blade bayonet. So it was like literally 6 barrels, in the cylindrical shape like the older ones had. And then in the middle, it had just this metal spike coming out. So it was literally like you just jab somebody and shoot them.
Right.
But I do want to point out with this one, because it is a revolver, like you pull the trigger and it rotates that cylinder. But the reason it is still considered a pepper box is because the cylinder is also the barrels. So it doesn't have a barrel past that cylinder. It's literally just the cylinder itself is the barrel.
Okay. I got you.
Because I want to say that's made of brass, and brass wouldn't hold up to the explosion. And obviously there's not. They're like an 1/8 inch of rifling, if that was even that.
Yeah.
And those have to be like the little short cartridges.
Yeah, the lifespan of a French Revolutionary probably wasn't very long, anyways. Probably outlived them, and probably not much longer.
Right.
They can pick it off of a dead body and then move on.
Yeah. So Matt, do you want to take page 5?
Yeah. A few pepperbox firearms were also made in the 20th century. During the 1960s, Robert Hilberg designed the Colt Defender Mark I, an 8-barreled pepperbox shotgun. However, this gun never went into full production. God, I can see why.
Yeah,
Yeah. Heckler
he's-
Couch. Go ahead.
This guy's
And
playing
just
around. Obviously, he knew it was not going to happen. He's just showing off his gunsmithing skills. Is what he's doing.
Maybe.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
got a front trigger, or I can't even really tell what's going on with the.
yeah, I was looking at other pictures of this one too, and it really is just like it's got the grip at the back with a trigger, and then it's got the grip at the front with a trigger. So, like, I don't know which trigger would do what. I don't know if one would fire, and then, the next one would rotate.
Okay, yeah, that works.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know. I have never seen that one before.
So everybody else was just adding more barrels. This guy was like, "Hey, let's just add another trigger." We're already adding more stuff to it.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not fix the problems with what we currently have. Just add some more stuff to it.
Add more stuff to it. You're right. All right. So Heckler and Couch produced the P11 in the 1970s. It was a 5-barrel pistol made for covert use underwater. It was designed to fire 7.62 by 36 darts electronically.
Yeah.
Really? That's cool.
It's crazy. The Russians also had an equivalent to that, which is I'm going to cover on the next page. But yeah, I mean, there's
So is that like tranquilizer dart?
No, it's I should have put a picture of this in here, but it was literally a 7.62 bullet. But it had like this weird fixture behind
it. Primer, it had a charge.
Yeah, it may have still like been a primer or something. I don't know.
I don't. I have to look. I mean, because one point in time, it was like I don't know, late 90s, early 2000. Remington came out a whole new design, and it was you'd have to change cartridges because of the trigger mechanism. It basically did a spark. It was an electronic trigger.
Oh,
so
weird.
There was no sear, there was no movement. It was just electronic, like you'd be pulling your video game controller. There's no mechanical resistance.
So wouldn't you have to charge that though?
Oh yeah. I never actually saw one. I had heard people, and I had read some of the reviews, like back when magazines were still a thing. And seeing some of them that were being tested early on, and like I said, they had to do a whole new cartridge. They had to do, but just saying all that, I mean, they could have being that it was designed for underwater, which is pretty cool. And if it was fired electronically, I mean, there wouldn't be that explosion it's trying to contain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming like they were thinking like simple is better, like underwater, like there's less moving parts here, and then I guess they're able to kind of keep it like there's like white caps looks like going into that, so like it was all self-contained, as it
That's what I was thinking. Like when they shot it, then it that's a seal on the end or something like that, and it would just pop through that, and they probably just throw that away, the whole insert.
Yeah, because it honestly looks like that whole barrel assembly just slots in.
Yeah, it looks.
It looks like a toddler designed this gun. Like it's like, hey, draw a gun or draw a weapon,
well,
and they
always did was they've been in the forefront for years on their designs and their guns. I mean, Special Forces used the HK-419. Basically, it was a gas operated M16 AR-15.
Interesting.
But they, as far as I know, I don't know that they all do, but I know there's a lot of them that I've heard recently. Guys talking that still use them and love them.
Sorry, Matt.
No, you're good. You're good.
Sai, let me ask you this: have you ever played Resident Evil 2?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I can't do scary games.
Okay.
They scare me.
Okay.
Literally.
So in that game, there's two main characters. One of them has a gun called the Matilda. That's what it's called.
Your mom's rifle. That's its name. Matilda.
Yeah. Well, this gun in this game is actually based off of an H&K pistol that had and Matt, you might remember me like showing this to you, just because I thought it was like cool. It had a stock that you would attach to it that added the capability for it to be a 3-round burst instead of one shot per trigger pull. And, I thought that was just a gimmick from that game, but H&K literally made that pistol to have that stock that went with it that could slide in and add that capability to it.
Well, that the vibes I get from this gun is definitely like the first thing I thought of was like Metal Gear Solid, like especially in like Metal Gear Solid 2, where he's like like getting in the ocean, tank liner carrier thing. Like I was like, this is something he would carry. Either that, or it's like something that you pick up in a game and like use once and then have to throw it away. It's like a pickup, in like an arcade style shooter or something.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it is. You get 5 shots and then
that's it. And
take the barrels out. Yeah, and I mean a lot of these later guns, like the Apache revolver especially, I toyed with the idea of doing an episode just on that. But obviously since these kind of fall into the pepper box category, it's kind of easier just to kind of touch on a whole bunch of them, and maybe in the future we can do a little bit of a deep dive into some of them. I'll take page 6 here. We're almost done, guys. The last page.
Here we go.
So there was also a Russian 4-barrel pistol called the OSA. This pistol was also designed to function underwater, firing non-lethal and flare rounds electronically. I did want to add on that P11, it was the 1970s, so both of these, being designed for use underwater, I really think that was like a Cold War.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Influence there.
Yeah.
The arms race with the pepper boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
The arms race with the 100-year-old weapon technology.
That's right, yeah.
So the Repringer is a design for a 3D printed firearm that would have 5 barrels and would be chambered in 22 CB cap. Matt, this is what I was talking about, that I think I was kind of touching on the old, you talking about it's
cap.
Literally just a pellet and a primer behind it.
Pretty much so. They were weird calibers too.
Yeah. So Saya, and I guess Matt, because it's 22 cap, this picture I've got here is the 22 cap, the 22 short, and then the 22 long rifle.
Okay.
Right.
So obviously each one you can kind of see from the brass casing that the 22 long rifle is going to have more of a charge behind it, more of a powder charge than the other two. So that bullet would actually be going faster, it would have more force behind it than the 2 smaller ones. And it's heavier. So this 3D printed design for the Repringer received widespread media coverage around 2013. I actually think I remember seeing this, that it was...
Yeah.
It blew up on the news because it's like, they're making the first 3D printed guns. But this last part, I haven't really verified any of this, but supposedly as recent as 2019, drug dealers in the UK have begun downloading files, allegedly, for 3D printed pistols resembling pepper boxes. And supposedly a student in London was the first person convicted in 2019 of 3D printing a multi-barrel pistol of this type. I think it was called like the Hexen was the name of the 3D printed.
So they're still being used, and they're kind of being used in like the same style that we were talking about. Like this is like underground personal defense.
Yeah, right up on people. Yeah, and I mean, it is important to note that handguns have been outlawed in the UK for like a long time. Obviously not like fully outlawed, but
they have huge limitations.
Yeah, they're
and it's funny. I mean, I could take you down a rabbit hole that's never ending on this one, but like over there, it's if I'm not mistaken, and I've heard a lot of people say this, but it's illegal to shoot a gun without a suppressor on it because they consider it a noise disturbance. But that's a lot of your hunters. And I can't remember. I was told one time, and I know some of these different countries, like you got to, like they're stored somewhere, but not at your house, unless like a farm, unless you're like a farmer or something like that. And you got.
So I got to 3D print my pepper box, and I have to 3D print my silencer. And then I'm good. And of course, my PLA plastic's gonna blow up in my hand, after I shoot it.
Yeah, so that's actually the thing with the Repringer. The reason it's in 22 cap is because for it to be a small 3D printed like plastic pistol, it has to have low pressure. Otherwise, it would just explode in your hand.
Oh boy.
I've only seen them like when the news has showed them. I've literally never even messed with a 3D printer. I think I'd have fun with one of them, just messing around. But I just can't see how you even. I mean, because I know we probably shot them, and you may not remember, but they're called calibres, and it's basically like that little cap CB one on the left. It's literally just a short brass with a very light green. I can't even remember what it is. But it's weaker than most pellet rifles. More than 20 feet away, you may not even kill a mouse or a rabbit and just look at you like, what was that for? You know, I'm joking on that. I mean, you could. They're like. I mean, they're about like a pellet rifle, but
and look, I've done a lot of 3D printing at school. I have like these basically hobbyist models called like Ender 3s. And the amount of tinkering that I have to do to just get those prints like normal and the errors that constantly happen. I can tell you right now, if I ever 3D printed anything that I could shoot, I would never do it. Like because there's just so much that can go wrong. Of course, you can buy some really fancy 3D printers, the stuff that prints metal even. So I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's huge in the suppressor world right now. They're because the baffling and making all the different baffles and all the different designs, and then they've got to weld them all together, and that just creates different heat. Different guys have different theories on them, but they do I think Daniel Defense did one. But yeah, that was the first thing I had seen of metal 3D printing, and to me, I'm just like, how does that work? I mean, that's not in my area. It's like the people that are doing the houses that they're 3D printing with concrete, which is so cool. You know, put up a whole house, walls, everything in like a couple days or something, which is just awesome. I think is really cool. But to have an explosion contained in plastic, and I think I've seen that one you're talking about, Jared, because it had like a frame all the way around it, like a revolver, but it wasn't the revolver changed. But I didn't even think about it would have been considered a pepper box because there was no rifling outside of what was on the cylinders. So
yeah,
that is pretty interesting. When I saw it, like I said, I think there was even a news thing not too long ago. They had she was a reporter or something, but she was there with the head of the ATF and somebody else, and they had a table of all these guns, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but there was a handful of the 3D printed guns.
Well, you'd have to fact check me on this too, but I remember I read an article about in Australia, they had like this buyback program, and there were people, and they had these loopholes where they would 3D print these guns, or they just would cobble together like these, pipes or whatever, and call it a quote unquote gun. And we were talking about how loose that term is, and they were just making money off of it. Like they weren't even using it for any kind of shooting purpose.
But they were taking in 3D printed guns,
right? And just getting the money from the buyback.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you think about it logistically. If you're going to do a government buyback, obviously you're going to have manpower out there, people taking the guns in, checking them in, signing them into a logbook, categorizing them, locking them up somewhere.
Well, usually those are all being destructed, so you got to kill those serial numbers with ATF. And I mean, because most of those guns are cut in half when those are all donated.
Yeah,
they'll cut the receiver in half and then just consider it killed. I don't know what goes into that as far as the paperwork. We know our disposition book and for logging guns in and out, customers, what have you. But
my point was though that if you're going to do a government buyback, I guess my point is logistically, I don't see how you would train all of your government employees that are participating in working on that. It would be almost impossible to train all of them. Like, hey,
how political are you trying to make this podcast?
I don't know, man. I don't know, man. But it's like, just think about it. Like, you take somebody and you'd have to pretty much go one-on-one and be like, this is what you need to look out for. People are going to bring in plastic guns. You need to be able to tell a toy from a real thing,
Well, what's interesting, and as you guys do this podcast, you might uncover more of this, but I feel like a lot of these old technologies are probably going to be kept alive by like the black market or like, these drug guys or whatever. Because, we think about modern weapons and they're accessible to like, the police force, authority figures. Be like, this is a weird example where like pepper boxes, something from 1790, has transferred over to the digital world, and then now it's coming back into the physical world. Like that's like a really weird
that is pretty crazy.
And like I wonder how much of this stuff, like, and y'all talked about Greek fire last week. I mean, we've seen, we got modern equivalents to that. Of course, you all don't know what Greek fire is, what it was exactly, whether it was quicklime or whatever the other chemical stuff was. But I mean, I don't know. That's crazy. You're right. I was shocked that they're still doing pepper boxes today, Jared. You were correct. It is still around, and guys in London are getting arrested for it. So
yeah, I mean,
right.
When I started doing the research for this, I was expecting there to be like a clear and defined date where it was like after this point we didn't use them anymore.
It's all hobbyist or something.
Yeah, which I guess brings us to a good transition into this little conclusion paragraph that I so lovingly only gave like 5 sentences. So I'm gonna read that real quick. So pepperbox guns.
Take 2.
Yeah. Pepperbox guns are a perfect example of how the evolution of firearms is not always cut and dry. There isn't always an explicit start date and end date for a style of firearm. They were around at the same time as many of history's better known firearms, and elements of the pepperbox can be seen in modern revolvers and derringers. So from the Revolutionary War to the Cold War and even past that, multi-barrel firearms have always been around and perhaps always will.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I can't wait to go 3D print a pepper box right now. So
easy,
you know what?
easy
I didn't even.
I'm not doing that.
I didn't even
the recorded
think of,
future.
Oh crap! Hold on. You all got to look this up. I didn't even think about a military pepper box that's being out. Well, I don't know if they were used. I know it was in development. I never even thought about it being, because it basically looks like if you took I don't know, like the size of the back of my truck. I don't know how big they are, but they'd be like 100 barrels. And going back to that one by H&K that was electronically ignited, that's how all these barrels were loaded, kind of like your Roman candles.
I know what you're talking about. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it would rotate through the barrels so fast, igniting and it's igniting it electronically. So the bullet towards the end or projectile or whatever it is has got the charge right behind it, then the bullet behind it with the charge. But it was like the number is just stupid. Like it would empty out that whole thing in like instantly. It's like, and I mean, that was just this crazy noise.
Yeah,
and it was like all these barrels going off, and they would use them like almost like your old school archery.
Yeah,
they would have that as if there was a unit coming through here, they have that set up as just like a booby trap that they don't even see.
So,
and when they fire it off, there's a million rounds coming down from the sky.
So Matt, that gun that you're talking about is not only fired electronically.
Wow, that's a full-on weapon. That's military.
Yeah,
voodoo there.
Well, that one is actually not only fired electronically. That is, from what I've heard, is like the very first railgun, like small-scale railgun. So those bullets are actually accelerated magnetically. They have a whole bunch of magnets in there. No,
I thought those were charged, but that would be. I mean, I've seen some of the railgun stuff, which is crazy technology.
Yeah.
Here you go. It's called the Metal Storm, the fastest shooting military weapon with a rate of fire of over 1.62 million rounds per minute. This is equivalent to
that's a long way from 3 rounds per minute.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my
That is
gosh.
equivalent to 180 rounds in a .01 second burst.
Wow.
The Metal Storm
That's
is a
crazy.
36 barreled stacked projectile volley gun designed by the Australians weapon company of the same name. The U.S. Navy used the Metal Storm on destroyers, battleships, and fast response units.
Well, there you go.
That's your
It's
modern
definitely
pepper box.
that's your modern, no, like legit giant deadly pepper box, from being something that you would have to be 2 feet to kill somebody to something that could wipe out 1,000 people with the push of a
Yeah.
button is
Yeah.
is quite the
Yeah, pretty soon we're going to be seeing drones with pepper boxes on them.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah,
3D printed.
man.
And, you know, I can't get off the 3D printed thing. That's just as wild to me. But
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well-
And you talk about that. That's a total different war, man. I can't imagine going into warfare
dude.
nowadays. I can run
It
my
would
drone
be-
around. I mean, you could not get away from me if I wanted to be on you. I mean, you're not. I mean, I can run it. I mean, mine's not even. You have some of these dudes that are driving the freaking things at like 200 mile an hour. I can't even. I'd run into you quick because I can't steer that fast.
Well, it's like you said
but-
earlier before we got started, man. You know, we're gonna see some of this stuff probably pop up in these little proxy wars and like smaller, you know, little escalations. And I mean, it's gonna be terrifying, but you know, hopefully, you know, technology's gonna evolve with it, and we'll get more defenses to these crazy pepper box, you know, hybrid things.
Yeah.
Right.
But, all
Well,
right,
and they already do now with the drones. They've already working out like EMPs and nets and all sorts, and drones that go after other drones automatically. So I mean, they're advancing it extremely fast.
Yeah.
Well, that's comforting. Well, look,
So-
Jared, I probably need to go. My kid's over there, and you know, hey, by the way, for any of those listening, like if you heard like screaming, it wasn't me. It's my son. He was running in and out of the room.
It was actually
you know.
Josiah. There was a
It
drone,
was just
a drone that had the metal storm on it. That you know he
he tried to dodge
pooped
it,
his
so
he pooped
now-
his pants tonight for sure. So
yeah, yeah, we didn't talk about poop or urine this time around.
yeah, we should have.
Yeah.
He peed on himself because peed in a jar
There it
They
is.
need a
peed in a jar to keep it
That's what
for
they'll do
6
now. They'll
months.
load up they'll load up the metal storm, make it look like a urine storm or something. And
All that ammonia. Well, the Romans would be proud.
Yeah, they'll
Yeah,
exactly.
torture you by hitting you with Greek fire, then hitting you with old urine to put it out.
Oh, urine.
Well, that wouldn't work,
Yeah.
right? So,
But
all right.
yeah,
well,
so-
I'm
All right.
gonna sign off, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this journey into pepper boxes, and hey, I'd love to come back. I really would if you
yeah,
want
for
to have
sure.
me again.
We're definitely seems like we're going to be going through having several different third members for each episode. So yeah, definitely
Okay.
thanks for joining us, and we would love to have you back. And
Yeah,
for everybody
absolutely. It's been
listening, thanks for watching or listening, whatever platform you're on. If you're even out there, you know it's only episode 2, but yeah,
If you build it, they will come, man.
yeah, for sure. So
I know your mama will play it.
of course.
Oh, that's so sweet.
yeah, I'm special to her, so
Yeah.
Lindsay's fast forwarding through it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
but-
skip.
but
All right, guys. See y'all later.
everybody out there, thanks for listening, and we'll see y'all in the
Yeah,
next one.
thank you.